Hello, KBIS Virtual, and welcome to the panel on European trends. I'm Ingrid Abramovich, the executive editor of Elle Decor magazine in New York City. I'd like to thank the NKBA for hosting us today. Today's panel will focus on lifestyle trends in the design space from across the pond. I know we're all missing our regular trips to Europe and the UK for design inspiration. So we decided to bring the latest news to you via our three panelists, who are all top trend forecasters. I'd like to introduce them first. Iris Havekes, founder of Seymour Interior Design, has a background in fashion. She works as an interior designer and trend watcher in the Netherlands. She'll be talking to us today about lifestyle trends in Europe and how they're manifesting in the design sphere. Justine Fox is the co-founder of Calzada Fox, a color consultancy based in London. She will be doing a deep dive into how global trends, everything from politics to pandemics to climate, subtly influence the colors we're starting to see around us. And Phil Pond is the trend forecaster behind his firm Scarlet Opus, which is based in the UK. His presentation will focus on a phenomenon that is already big and only going to get bigger in the design space, outdoor living. Iris, let's start with your presentation on lifestyle trends and how they're driving change in design.
Okay, I will. Thank you for the introduction. I'm very happy to present you the bathroom and kitchen trends. So I'm gonna share my presentation. Okay, perfect. Here's my presentation for the new bathroom and kitchen trends I spotted for the upcoming season and year. And Corona put a magnifying glass on and spotlight on all the existing trends and really accelerated everything. And the main trend is really a question. How do you feel? Our home is very important these times, and even more important is our bathroom and kitchen. So, how do you feel? We want to create a sacred space where we feel faith, trust, safe, and where we can rejuvenate and have a breath of fresh air. We need to create a stillness and a place where we can recharge, a healing home. But we also need a personal and private space where we can have rituals and create trust and rest and peace, like bath rituals, lighting a candle, smell a nice scent with aromatherapy, to relax and unwind and create a wellness Zen sphere, maybe with a steam shower or a sauna. And for this mood, we surround ourselves with a minimal and comforting style. It's a bit of a mix of Scandinavian and Japanese design, combined in the Japandi, a sustainable and eco-friendly space. Our health is very important to us, and now we know it for sure. And health means clean, so easy to take care of materials, smart materials, tech materials, but also a holistic design approach inspired by biophilic design and more green around us, and we take that indoors. We design based on neuroaesthetic studies where color, light, shape, material finishes, as well as scent and mood, healthy environments are created. This we do not only in our home, but even in public spaces. So imagine a natural swimming pond in a public park in the middle of the city. Sorry. Design-wise, we create a multifunctional room with kitchens fully integrated in the living room. The bathroom becomes a sitting room where you also can quietly read a book. We have blurred spaces and open plan layouts which we can separate with sliding doors or semi-transparent curtains or walls into smaller private spaces. Soundproof and acoustic materials are very important here. Trends are directing in flexible solutions for tiny houses, city living, and smaller budgets, like flexible baths or portable baths in showers like this bath bucket. Low budget luxury spas and sauna solutions. Also bathrooms and kitchens integrated in cabinets or foldable tubs and kitchens. Forms for the sinks and vanities are freestanding islands, round, asymmetric compositions, or even floating. It definitely is personalized, and we see a lot of colored materials like colored concrete. Luxurious materials and mirrors are organic and in round shapes. We have clean lines for a safety feeling and a warm welcome. Both nature-inspired, organic, smooth and seamless, but also a bit rough with a wabi-sabi texture that you can see in this one. So I also spotted some really heavy forms, literally rocks. A rough stone that grounds us and has the wabi-sabi imperfection in it. Oh, sorry. Most important for the material trends is that they are really easy to clean. Anti-microbial non-porous fixtures like copper, quartz, cork and bamboo, and smart nanotech materials like Phoenix. The feeling for the material is warm and personal and nature inspired. A lot of woods, plants, marbles and stones. Also, we see a lot of matte materials, colored concrete, as I mentioned, and sustainable and eco-friendly materials. For texture, we are seeing very tactile materials, ribbed surfaces, and materials that you really want to touch. So this is a quick overview for the trends I spotted for the kitchen and bathroom. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love the examples you showed. Are they mostly from Dutch design, or where did you?
There's a really mixture of European design. Most of the pictures are taken by myself at fairs in Milan and Köln. And I also spotted some trends at really good showrooms from some Dutch designers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So Justine, I had a little preview of your presentation, and the thing that amazed me, and I think will amaze people, is that much of it had been done even before the pandemic started. It just seemed really ahead of the curve, shall we say. So now, with no further ado, let's see your presentation on color.
Thank you. When we talk about color in design and especially in color forecasting, because color is so central to our experience of the world, we're affected very much on an emotional level. And so when we're color trend forecasting, as you said, we're looking quite far ahead at the things that are happening, the major macro drivers that are pushing us forward. And particularly for this season, we had quite a lot going on. So to start off, especially from a European perspective, across the UK, we had a movement called Extinction Rebellion, making a lot of noise. So that, composed with Greta Thunberg, really put kind of the extinction emergency on our radars. As Europeans as well, we've also been experiencing a lot of extremism in terms of views, and people, particularly in the UK, we felt it through the whole process, painful process of Brexit, where it's actually divided families. But this is something that we're seeing right across the world as well. also associated with climate change. Our media was full of things like the fires in Australia or the west coast of the US. It felt like our planet was almost burning. And news was popping out of Wuhan in China, of a new virus. And if you listen to some of the scientists that were starting to talk on some of the platforms then, they were talking about it as this could be the one that they've been waiting, the one they've been waiting for. Couple that with our advancements in technology. So a lot of people were starting to feel concerned and feeling insecure about their job prospects as AI could take over more and more of these aspects. And so it felt like to compete in this world, you have to be on all the time. And so that 24/7 living. And what we've seen is that it's kind of directly impacted our health through increasing obesity and mental health problems as well. So it all felt pretty apocalyptic. And so when we're looking at this with colour trends, what we tend to do is either we want to counter or we want to balance what's happening in the world. And so we have gone for positivity. So we've taken the positive aspects. We're embracing the fear and moving along with that. So I'll just give you like a quick brief outline of the 4 stories that we were covering. And these colour palettes are really originally from a global perspective and from a cross-industry perspective. So in our first story, we talked about loan. So looking at the positivity of being on your own, as more and more of us are living this way, and the kind of apps and technology that is starting to support us through emotional fitness, having that kind of making being on your own kind of an aspiration because of the privilege of time and space to be creative and to learn about things. And then also we're looking at kind of an appreciation of imperfection and, you know, just loving it for the sake of it. Our second trend, Bionic, looks at transhumanism, which may sound as though it's very far away. However, there are lots of things that we're doing already through our eating habits, through the way that we monitor our bodies, that is starting to use technology to make a better us. The other aspect that we're quite interested in is digging deep into the olfactory system and looking at aroma and how things like that can help us. So if you think of something like lavender, so you can use that in depression. Jasmine can give us more positivity and motivation, and mint can give you kind of concentration. So how would that then marry with colour? So we started looking at colour from a homeopathic perspective almost, where you have this microdose of colour, and so you achieve the benefit through that. Then our third one, Anon, is about, it's almost like the opposite of lone in a way. So lone is about how can we be alone, and the other one is how can we be together. So originally it was inspired by films like The Staggering Girl and Parasite, and how we can face those uncomfortable realities of life. They talk about our privacy will be all but gone by 2030, especially in city living. And so we were starting to think, well, this is going to be a process. It's not going to just happen one day. And how do we start to appreciate the positivity in a lack of privacy? So that transparency was a focus for us. And then also in natural beauty, so looking at things that would ordinarily be scary, be dark, and how again you kind of embrace that beauty in it. Then our final one was purpose, and this is really kind of moving on from the eco futures and where do we actually take it. So it's understanding as human beings, we're actually passengers on this world. We saw actually through the pandemic how much better the world did without us. So it's starting to understand that and respect it and be more purposeful in the way that you use. organisations like Parley for the Oceans, they go beyond the reuse, recycle to avoid, intercept and design. And that's the way we move ourselves out of these. Also looking at our economies as well, but in positive ways. Do we measure GDP or should it be based on happiness? So these are kind of like the big questions that we were looking at. And so we've started to have a little look of how this could potentially play out for kitchen and bathroom. So the first one relates to loan. And you'll see straight away that the main focus here is green. So when we need confidence, or we need to understand that the world is okay, green is the go-to colour for it. You can see it with the association with millennials, how they've embraced this kind of miniature horticulture over the last few years because we've become more urbanised. And so green gives us that kind of reassurance, that association. What I really love in kitchen and bathroom is that it allows you to be like a little bit more playful with surfaces. So using these kind of pine forest tones, you can see there's mark making and little interventions that give you this slightly subversive playfulness to it. So there's a slight surrealism to it. And it's a fantastic colour to use as a conduit. With a lot of smaller spaces now, the kitchen could potentially be a corridor, a liminal space, and how do you like transfer it from one end to the other? This like softly charred orange as well, that's really a connection between kind of spirituality and the earth as well. And we've seen this also in cabinetry as well, in a matte finish, and quite often used in unusual ways then on kind of like floor to wall decor. In our second, Bionic, we put blue under the microscope for this one. You can see that the blue that we're describing here, the bottom image from Adam Nathaniel Furnish, who's a UK designer. There's a slight redness to the undertone of it. And quite often it would have been a tone that we would have associated with the children's industry, quite soft. But you see in the application of it, and the contrast and the relationships that it's building with its palette, with its surrounding colours, it actually talks more of the futurism aspect, which I think is really interesting. The bottom left here, we've got a little bit of cabinetry from Studio Ronda. And again, you can see that blue and how it translates into a translucency. I think with Europe, we're still seeing a huge amount of use of plywood within residential, like kitchen particularly. And I think that's because of this, it's got kind of this light peach tint to it, which is uplifting and open. Also, it's slightly more sustainable than some other like woodworking practices. And I love the fact that she's used this transparency so that you can still appreciate the grain. So this is like a part where you start seeing these pastels coming in. Again, with Sabine Marcel's bathroom unit on the right in yellow. These are usually colours that you would associate with a children's playroom. However, it's that balance and that contrast against the more neutral tones that takes it to a slightly more sophisticated element. Just a little point about the top left as well. It's not really colour related, but it's just something that I've noticed over the last like 6 months, like people's fascination with window seats. And I wonder whether that's again this kind of this interest in the use of dead space and that connection, that transitionary period as well. The third one that I've got is Moves On from Anon. And this embraces the kind of darker tones, which is quite interesting. So I know that we've had some kind of dark tones in the past years, and particularly these are associated with personal electronics and influenced by that. So they have this like digital quality, but they also connect back into that kind of luscious, fearful, but enjoyment of it. It's almost like a dark humor to it, which I think is really interesting, and that exoticism that comes with it. It's almost like creating this hospitality environment through color within your own space. The fresh spearmint that we've picked out as well, I think that's interesting because, again, this is a colour that's been kind of bubbling along in various industries for the last couple of years. But I think that it's interesting for now in terms of how it starts to flip its importance within a palette. So it becomes like an accent, and you have that like real duality of like light and dark within a space. And then we'll move on to this last one as well. So this final trend really looks towards innovation and biotechnology, in particular, purposeful design. And with 2021, a lot of the technologies that we've been following for the last 10 years, seeing them like grow, will actually be taken to scale this year. So we could potentially be looking at large scale fermented cellulose-based materials that could be used in bathrooms, could be used in kitchens because they have like repellent qualities. And also how we tackle some of these colour pollutant issues. So perhaps starting to look at aspects through structural colour, or colour that we apply through light or through effects. So I think that's kind of quite an interesting, so it's really interesting to see that some of these aspects, like this at the bottom right, is a cellulose sequin from Elisa Brunato. So this is a bio-based sequin, and she's managed to create this iridescence. Again, on the far left, there's an image from a new designer, young designer, Mitsu Textiles. And again, what's interesting is that it's this casting of light. And then when you look up to big hitters like Patricia Ercola for Laufin, they're using this same principle where they've not applied colour to their product themselves, but they're using the dichroic aspect across it. So I think all of those are really interesting. The last point that I would say is looking at neutrals as well. So obviously grey has been a massive trend for a long time now. And it's psychologically, it has no positive attributes to it. It's not hugely uplifting or anything. We still want a really lovely neutral base. So what's interesting is the emergence of these kind of almost amorphic tones where you've got a slight touch of colour coming through. And we're particularly seeing it in the kind of lilac undertones and these kind of green-blue, like seaweed kind of colours coming through. So I just thought that those were quite interesting points.
So when you talk about undertones, are you also talking about neutral colors having those undertones?
Everything. Yeah, as you look at a colour, the best way to do it, I was always taught, is to relax your eye and just let it blur out, and you'll start seeing all these amazing colours in it. So even if you have like a full neutral palette, you can still have like discord and clashing with it if your undertones aren't nicely aligned. So if they've got the same kind of like family to them. And I think it's interesting as well, an interesting point in time where for a long time, our tastes have been very separate, European, American, Asia Pacific, in terms of colour nuance, the subtlety of colour. But you're seeing this kind of like convergence at the moment almost, where we're accepting these more kind of earthy, complex tones that the US has traditionally had in residential interior design. And then also these kind of like, you know, Pan-Asian pastels as well. And so it's quite an interesting time for colour, and you still get these like quite strong pops coming through, but more and more they're acting as a feature, and they're coming through colour that has been recycled or reused in some way. So it's shifting our perception of what's beautiful in colour.
Fascinating. Thank you, Justine.
Thank you.
And now, Phil, you call the outdoors the fifth room, and certainly it's, you know, outdoor living is just exploding here. Can't wait to see your presentation to see, you know, the ways it's manifesting in the UK and Europe. So over to you.
That's very generous of you, Ingrid. Thank you. And I'm quite proud to be following two such good presenters. It's boosted me a little bit. So my slides are purposefully and unusually for a trend agency, text heavy. They're text heavy because those of you that are currently printing the screen, the text will help you remember what that charming fellow from England actually had to say about the slide. I thought I'd talk about the outdoors because the events of 2020 has made some permanent changes to how we will all live. And I mean all, our emotional reaction and the manner in which it has changed our psyches, and I'm referring to the thing, I won't mention it out loud, of 2020, is a global impact. We're all more alike than we actually sometimes recognize. And during national lockdowns, whether they be self-imposed or government imposed, we've all discovered that our home means much more to us than perhaps we originally thought or thought before this pandemic came along. We've all been forced to spend more time in our homes. So the first thing that's done is permanently change the priority list for the spending of disposable income. And that means that we will shift the bulk of that spending from fast fashion to our homes and interiors. And that goes for both renters and homeowners. Obviously, renters might spend a little less, but their home has taken on a brand new importance to them. So as we've been forced to spend more time at home, our homes and gardens, as we move forward, will take on several different roles for us, because we will want a life full of experiences, even though perhaps over the next 2 or 3 years, some of us might be financially stretched as the world bounces back together towards a good economy. So we might not be going to restaurants, we might not take foreign holidays, we might not go to work as often. So our home will need to take on all of those roles. The home itself, and in particular the garden, will need to be a bar for us when we need it to. It will need to be a restaurant. It will also need to be a holiday resort so that we can enjoy ourselves. It will be play areas. At times, the garden and the home will even become the school. So lots of different changes going on. And the role of interior design for interior designers is about to take on a much more formal role with regard to the garden room, hence renaming it the fifth room of the house. It will take on a totally different importance. It will want the same kind of convenience and comfort as any other room in the house. And that's a great opportunity for the whole supply chain, from material suppliers to manufacturers to interior designers, to get clever and innovative about the materials and products that they're going to bring to market. Do you know, I forgot to put my timer on, so I'll do that now. Yeah, what sort of professional presenter is this? So here we look at all the sorts of things that we're suggesting to our clients in terms of manufacturers and designers that they should be giving new consideration to in terms of the garden moving forward. So in the top left-hand side, we'll see garden clothing needing to be more fashionable. If we're going to be wearing it more often, if we're going to be wearing it when we might have visitors around, we'll want to look the part. So fashion in textiles and garden clothing is going to be important. Lighting. If you're an interior designer, clearly I'm not. If you're an interior designer, you'll know the significance of lighting to any room scheme. So lighting itself, the light units, the style of the light units, taking Justine's point, the color of the light units, all of that takes on a brand new significance in the garden. If we look in the center of the screen towards the bottom, what I'm trying to demonstrate there is that the wooden furniture with the cushion placed on it moving forward is not really going to be acceptable for the garden. We want real comfort. The sofa that you've got inside the house should be the level and degree of comfort that we need for sofas in the garden, for beds in the garden, for chairs in the garden. And that will mean that the world of manufacturing of furniture needs to step up. It needs to produce product that is weatherproof and suitable for outdoor use all year round. Because what we're finding is, as we move forward, it doesn't matter what climate you live in, that garden is going to have to be appropriate for year-round use. And one of the elements on Earth that's important to human beings, not only to live, but to be around for a sense of well-being, is water. So we should see a significant increase in the desirability for water features in the garden, be that large or small, a tiny LED operated, solar operated water fountain, through to a swimming pool if you have that type of budget. So all of those elements, including textiles, which I've tried to show, and I'll show some more a bit later on the left-hand side in the middle there, the type of textiles, the type of patterning, the type of textures. Again, whatever we would be using inside is the type of design consideration that should be given to these new rooms outside. The garden, as I've said, becomes a different place for us moving forward. It has to take on new roles. And as interior designers and manufacturers, we should be thinking more about the garden in terms of the points that you can see on screen. So there are beginning to emerge all-weather TV screens. So one of the things that we have disconnected with over the last year is the cinema, going to the cinema to see movies for a multitude of reasons. We don't feel safe. Mostly they've been closed. That's a good reason not to go. But also because we haven't had the release of new movies, and that's likely to be the case through to the back end of 2022, according to the film industry, which, as you know, is mostly based in the US. So creating outdoor cinemas in the garden is actually going to be quite a desirable thing to have done, be that in a cold climate, in which case we've got to think about heating, be it in a hot climate or a wet climate, in which case we've got to have the appropriate products. And of course, more of us in the future are going to work from home. That might just be for a part of the week. It might be for some people all of the week. But the vast majority of people, in fact, one of the first companies in the world to develop a post-COVID era workplace is an American business based in Atlanta. It's a carpet manufacturer called Interface. If you Google that, you can find the story of what they've done for their office and what they're doing for their staff at home. One of the considerations, if you're a designer, for working at home is, I don't know about you, but if it's in the summer or if it's between April and September, I'd rather work outside than in the lounge or on the dining table or anything like that. So that means that some new considerations have to be, what products are there that I can work with a laptop in the sunshine? What products and furniture can be developed to incorporate device charging points so that I don't have to go indoors all the time to charge a product? What screens are going to work? What PowerPoints are going to be available for Zoom meetings? Here we are, hello. So all of those considerations are going to need to be put into the home. And what we're going to find is that all of us will invest more heavily in the garden as a room rather than the garden just as somewhere to sit on the grass or grow the vegetables. It's taking on much bigger significance than that. So a workplace, it's going to be a cinema, it's going to be a holiday resort, it's going to be a restaurant, and it might even be something else more close to home for you all. Garden sculptures. So here we can see other aspects of the garden that are going to be important moving forward. And I'd like to point out the bottom right-hand side to start with. It doesn't matter whether your garden is in fact a small balcony or it's a farm. To both of those individual owners, it's a really important space, and it's the space where they get outside. So increasingly, we can see products that allow small spaces to be where we grow vegetables, where we grow plants, where we can create a small garden and sit and have a sense of well-being. The world, as we all know, needs an increase in the activity called biodiversity. So we're going to see an explosion of products that encourage wildlife into our gardens. I'm sure some of you will agree and have experienced the same thing as me. As last summer, my community, the town where I lived, fell silent on days as the traffic disappeared, the consumers disappeared, and we all stayed home. And what it allowed me to do was not only understand that we've got seasons, it allowed me to see and experience the seasons, and it allowed me to see and hear the nature that's always been around me. I just haven't encouraged it or helped it any. And we're going to see a great increase in the desirability to do that. And in the bottom left-hand corner, again, to help space, we're starting to see the emergence of furniture, which integrates the vegetable plot within it, so that we can sit with friends and family. One day that will return. Sit with friends and family and perhaps pick the lettuce leaves from the middle of the table, or take the herbs from the middle of the table, or pick the tomato as we share a meal together. So all of those things become important. And of course, the kitchen. Now, the kitchen has evolved over the last few decades, and it's done it really quietly. When my gran used to be in the kitchen had 4 walls and a door, and nobody went in there and talked to her. She was supposed to go in there and do the meals and bring them out to us in a different room while we sat and waited for that. And then the kitchen started to support my gran, and it didn't so much as merge with as it acquired the dining room and the lounge and created that huge open space that all homes now have, just that we failed to rename it as something else. Well, the kitchen, not satisfied with that empire, is making a play to acquire the garden. And we're going to see outdoor kitchens become highly desirable the world over. And again, it won't matter whether your outdoor kitchen is something like the top middle of the screen or the bottom left of the screen, or in fact, the bottom middle, it's just a tabletop grill. Whichever one you're using, we're going to want to move the cooking to where the friends and the family and the activity is. And we're already beginning to see, certainly in the UK, but also down in Italy and southern Spain, developers of new properties building in outdoor kitchens as something that helps them to sell the properties faster and at higher pricing. So there's lots of new products coming through for this. So that kitchen will take on new significance outdoors. And for that, we're going to need mostly to incorporate the expertise of interior designers. Final point on the outdoor kitchen, and in fact outdoor materials, we'll start to see a continuance of the trending up of the material terrazzo, both as tables and terrace surfaces. And what we'll see is an emergence of giant terrazzo. So rather than lots of tiny colored chips set into the base material, those colored chips will take on a much larger shape and give a totally different appearance to the product. So the outdoor kitchen, doesn't matter what your budget is for that, it's moving up the wish list of renters and homeowners, great opportunity for interior designers. And so in conclusion, the experience of 2020, which I like to refer to as a lost year now, means that that outdoor space, small or large, is going to move up the must-have list of people that are moving home or buying their first home or choosing a different home. It's an essential element of a human's well-being, and it's taken on a new significance because nearly all of us now understand that. So as I've said before, just that last sentence you can see on the screen, in the future, we'll invest a lot more in our homes and gardens, and we will invest a lot less in stuff like fast fashion. So good time for interior designers and manufacturers of interior products, and as it would have it, trend agencies. Yay, that's me done.
Thank you, Phil. I want to do all of this in my garden. Giving me a blueprint for this for next summer. So this was wonderful. I mean, I think you each had a very different perspective, but it all adds up to a real direction. One thing I'm curious about is what differences you're seeing between what's happening in Europe and the UK and the US. What, in terms of design, what do you think are the differences?
Well, for me, it's has a lot to do with the size of the home. In America, the homes are a lot bigger, have a lot more rooms than most of us in Europe have. And I think that's a different approach for when we are suddenly living in a home with a lot of people and have to share rooms and have to share space. So maybe some challenges are a bit different in Europe than in the USA or America. I don't know if you agree, but for me, I think that's a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I live in New York City where we live in small spaces, but
yeah, of course.
Most people have more space to play with here. Are there any European trends that you think are going to be are less likely to make the jump to the US? What do you think, Justine?
I mean, so definitely some of the kind of more powerful colours, those could potentially be a little bit more challenging. However, just looking at those kind of softer tones coming through, and you saw it with a lot of the colours of the year, that there was a synergy between them. I think that the world is kind of pulled a little bit closer together in those respects. So I can see a lot of those doing quite well. Anything that looks towards like hope and positivity, I think people are going to start like bringing those elements into their homes. And within the kitchen and bathroom aspect of it, I think, you know, if you are slightly nervous of colour, or your client is slightly nervous of colour, then you start to bring in those like accent elements, whether it's through the ironmongery, the hardware. There are some beautiful like little detailings on taps, and you can get this like huge array of colours that can kind of give you that just little zip uplift without feeling like it's overwhelming. But I think that we've, you know, personalisation in terms of colour has been something that's been growing for the last couple of years, and what the pandemic's done for it is it's really accelerated it, because we understand the importance of having colour around us that is perhaps not trend, but relates to us, connects with us personally on like, you know, deeply emotional levels and supports us.
Phil, I think you were spot on the potential for outdoors, and I was really fascinated to see the advice that you have for you know, everyone in the supply chain on how to think about it. As an editor, I'm there at the end when the products are coming out, and But of course, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. And that's what manufacturers do all the time, and designers as well. You dealt with the outdoors. I'm wondering what in terms of kitchens and bathrooms, what trends are you seeing inside?
Well, thanks for the comment. I think I'd like to add a little bit of comment to the previous question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
There really aren't. If we take the two exceptions that my esteemed colleagues have mentioned, one is, of course, color, which is very different from the US to Europe. And of course, physical space that Iris mentioned is obviously different in general. But from a trend agency viewpoint, and we work with US companies, from a materials, a texture, and a pattern and a shape point of view, and the motivation, the reasons why design trends emerge, there's very little difference between what people in Dubai want to what people in New York or Sydney or London require. It's pretty much not the difference that perhaps is thought that there is. And I suppose a really good, but well, no, two really good examples of that, because everybody will get it. BMW don't make cars for the European market and cars for the American market. They just make a car that goes everywhere. And if we take a US example, Nike don't launch sports shoes for London and a different one for New York and a different one for Beijing. It's a sports shoe that everybody wants everywhere. And essentially, I think that might be interesting for people to take on board. Some listeners might disagree with me, but they'd be wrong. To answer your last question, Ingrid, I think what we're seeing is darker, richer materials and tones. So darker marbles beginning to emerge, darker woods such as mahogany and walnut being used, or the appearance of walnut and mahogany being used. And probably already trending up is a use of the ever popular indigo blue on kitchen units. And probably last, I'd say the, thank goodness, some people might say, the beginning of the end of copper, and the introduction of brass as a material, as the metallic material that brings a touch of luxury. Probably said more than I should there, shouldn't I?
All interesting.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I add something to this?
Sure.
I actually saw some of the new trends a year ago from America that are now in Europe. And the one thing is to mix and match really rich materials that normally in Europe are not combined. Very bold combinations of these luxury materials. And that I actually see more and more in Europe. And before it was only in the Americas.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think this was, we've gotten so much inspiration today, and I really want to thank all three of you and KBIS for hosting this panel. And thank you so much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for having us. Bye.